So here we are with the handy sharpener. Brad, what do you have, man?
Well, I've got a lot of kinds of knives, different kinds of knives, and people collect different kinds of knives. A lot of people like Buck, they like Schrade, they like Benchmade, they like cold steel, and they have their reasons why they like them. And I happen to be kind of a fan of Buck knives, partially because a long time ago I ended up with a Buck knife, and that was actually this one. It's a folder, and it's kind of a heavy knife, and it's a little bit of a thick knife, so you can use it for hard things. Then you have one that's like this. You've got a 119. That's a hunting knife, and it's mainly for skinning and cutting. It's not as tough as some of the other knives because it's thin. Old hickory, which might be a knife like this, and I know this is an old hickory because, not just because it says so on the handle. That can be phonied up real easy. Right here is where it says Ontario knife, made in USA. Ontario knife, there's something else I know about Ontario knife. Ontario knife was very proud of what they make. If their stamp wasn't absolutely crystal clear, they would change the die that they stamped it with. So when you look at this and see how crisp and clear and sharp the stamp is, that's an indication that it's a real old hickory. Now, this is an old hickory, okay? Let's turn it around this way. And you notice I put on there not for sale, all right? So you have an old hickory like that, and you have one like this. Ontario knife, made in USA. Now I bought this particular knife from a hardware store in Anacortes, Washington. I was out there about 3 years ago and I bought this one. This one was there, but I didn't buy it. So what did I do? 3 years later, I called them up and said, "Do you still have that knife?" "Yes." So I bought it, all right? There's all kinds of knives that you can have. This is a Japanese knife, it's Japanese steel. I didn't think too much about that knife until a guy brought me 2 of the big cans of food. He said, "I don't have a can opener, what do I do?" And I said, "Well, let's try this knife. You hold the can," I punched it through, and then I took this knife and I ripped, and he'd turn it and I'd rip. So we cut both of them open, and it really did come out just about this sharp, just like this. Oop, there you go. It was about that sharp after I got done cutting 2 cans open, so I came to the conclusion that's not junk steel. So we have a knife here. This is going to be a collector. Somebody will pick this one up. It's actually a Buck 119, but it's got an antlered handle. Buck is a good collector because it's American. It's an entrepreneurial success story that started back, I think, in about 1950, 48, somewhere in there, in California. Now they're in Post Falls, Idaho. And Chuck Buck, who is the grandson, used to be the president. I don't know exactly. I think he's a president, not the CEO anymore. I know Chuck and Lori Buck, so anyway, I stop and see them. And that's part of the reason I use their knives. There's some other things on the table. It's really kind of funny. Now, this is a no-name knife. It was actually left on my table. So I kind of laughed about it because it looks like a cheap knife. It's actually extremely durable. It doesn't give much. It's got a good edge on it. For carving, I like the radius on the knife and I like the tip. If you can go inside radius, outside radius, and tip in one motion, just like that. Goes right down and goes right off the tip. See, I don't have to keep adjusting the knife. Once I put it at the angle I want, it's at the right angle all the way out and off the tip. So with that knife, I would just brush like that. You know, different knives. Benchmade, I happen to think Benchmade is a really, really hard knife. It's a good knife. Gerber's a good knife. When I was selling knives, it was Gerber. I didn't sell Benchmades and everything. For the money, Gerber was really good. It was a hard blade. It wasn't too hard. You don't snap the tip off. You don't get little nicks in the blade. So the Gerbers that I was picking up actually had just the right temperament, and they were hard for durability, and then they were also easy to sharpen, and they held an edge pretty good. So that's a plug for Gerber because I liked them. Benchmade is a really good knife. Cold steel is good, but in my opinion, I see a lot of cold steels with the tips broke off. That means they're brittle. Hardness, okay, but I don't want the tips broke off. And people say, yeah, but they misused it. A lot of people misuse their knives. But the Gerbers and the Benchmade, I don't see with the tips broke off that much. And you know those people are still misusing their knives. So different types of knives, Gerber, Benchmade, cold steel. Old Timer's a really good knife. They corrode easy, but they're a very hard knife. You see knives, Old Timer, that are 50 years old. People have been carrying them, and they're still in pretty good shape. They're not worn out. You can make them sharp pretty easy. I like Old Timer. Case is a very good knife. Even if it's made in China, it's funny. You can take China-made stuff, and if you had good standards that it was made to, it's still going to be a good product. So when somebody says, but that was made in China, I don't like that it was made in China because it takes away American work. I don't have to dislike it because it's made in China because it's cheap. It's not always cheap. If you order cheap, you get cheap. If you order good and you pay for good and you have your specs and your standards up there, you'll probably get good, and you keep it good because you just reject them. Me and another guy, the guy that makes these, we rejected 6,000 sharpeners because they didn't sharpen the edge here right. That caused us a lot of grief. I mean a lot of grief, and it took 6 months to get the right sharpeners, and it ended up costing me 35 cents more a sharpener, even though it wasn't my fault. So anyway, we call out the bad, we qualify our product myself, and if I don't like it, it gets called out and sent back. We just don't have inferior grade product, and we don't have inferior corners. It's the sharpness of the corner that makes it work. I don't know, I've been using this one, let's see. There goes the fingernail. If it'll take your fingernail off, you can zoom right in here and see the white. That's fingernail.
And what's the best thing a gentleman can do or an owner can do to keep their knife good for life?
Good for life means don't abuse it too much. Tune it up almost every time you use it. Why? If you actually dull it, and then you dull it, and you dull it, and dull it, okay, and then about 3 months down the road, you're going to take and sharpen it, you take off too much. If you use my little sharpener out of your pocket where it belongs, just like this right here, okay, and you do little tune-ups frequently, I had twins. If you do frequent tune-ups, you never have to spend more than about 20 seconds, you'll keep your knife for life. Oil it once in a while, clean it up a little bit. Other than that, just use it. That's what they like to be used.